A 24-year-old man has been charged in yesterday's stabbing in Ontario that left 3 people injured. The attack happened inside a gender studies classroom at the University of Waterloo.
Investigators have reason to believe that this was a planned and targeted attack motivated by hate related to gender expression and gender identity.
Police say the man was a student of that university at some point and had no previous criminal record. He appeared in court today.
The direct effects of right-wing propaganda and their hatred are rising to the surface. Yesterday, a former student at Waterloo University named Giovanni Villalba-Aleman stabbed 3 people in a gender studies class. And it wasn't an accident that it was a gender studies class. He intentionally targeted a gender studies class. Now, one of the witnesses to the horrifying attack, James Chow, spoke with Global News about what happened.
It was towards the end of the class, and a man came in with a backpack. He said to the teacher, like, "Oh, is this such and such psychology class?" And the professor replied, "Oh, no, you're probably in the wrong class." Then he said, "Oh, what class is this?" The professor replied, like, "This is a gender class or philosophy of gender class." And while the man was listening to her reply, he put down his backpack in front of him at his feet and he pulled out a knife. It still had like one of those like sheaths or covers on it, like a plastic one. And the thing that disgusts me the most is that this vile, mischievous smile that he had on his face, and immediately the professor's face like just turned to like pure fear, and also the other classmates were like starting to scream.
Now, Chow said that he attempted to throw chairs at the attacker, who continued to stab the professor. From AP News, several students tried to stop the attack, including by throwing chairs at the suspect, while others fled the room. The suspect initially posed as a victim before police identified him and arrested him, Police Chief Mark Kroll said. A 38-year-old professor and 2 students, a 20-year-old woman and a 19-year-old man, were transported to hospitals where they were treated for stab wounds described as not serious but not life-threatening by Waterloo police. Now, we have photos from the attacker's Instagram that show he graduated only last week. Here are the photos of the attacker. And when I first heard this story this morning, we were talking about it with the producers. One thing I said was, I'd bet you any amount of money that this man is a fan of right-wing radicals who are spreading anti-LGBTQ rhetoric like Matt Walsh. And Matt Walsh is tweeting these things. We'll pull up a tweet from him right now. These are inspiring real world violence. He says, "We are totally winning the argument against gender ideology, absolutely crushing the gender ideologues from every angle. All they can do now is double down on censorship, threats, and blackmail. It's all they have, and they know it." And this type of rhetoric, I'm sorry, if you call queer people pedophiles all day, every day, that's your whole thing, that's your whole shtick. How do people react to hearing that someone's a pedophile? Violently. And I think that, if the person is a pedophile, it's justifiable anger, justifiable violence. But when you are framing an entire group of people as a danger to children, how is it not a logical step for your audience to want to stop that? They're going to turn to violence. And they have turned to violence against a group that is already disproportionately impacted by hateful violence. Your rhetoric has only ramped up violence against queer people, and it's going to keep happening. Or not just queer people. I don't know the ideologies, or I don't know the genders of the people who were stabbed, but anyone who's even learning about queer theory could be a potential victim to these hateful right-wingers. Now, and the student who was interviewed by Global News, James Chow, who you saw in that video, said that he was almost unsurprised by this kind of attack, given the rising levels of hatred around the world.
Did I expect this to happen? Honestly, a bit. Because just given the social and political climate of the last few years of like like violent right-wing conspiracies spewed through like social media and becoming a talking point even in the mainstream media, I'm not surprised that eventually someone becomes so ideologically deluded that they think that they're doing justice when they attack an instructor and children. One thing I want to emphasize is that my classmates are like second and third years. They're like maybe 20, 21. Like these are kids.
And I mean, he's right. And it's really sad, Dara, to hear him say that it's expected, but it is. I mean, we've had the Club Q shooting, the hateful rhetoric, the violence towards LGBTQ people. Like you never expect it to happen to you. You don't expect to be the person in that situation, but it is absolutely something that was foreseeable.
It's crazy that now taking a gender study class puts a target on your back in any way. Now, they're lucky they weren't in the US because that would have been fatalities there. We would have been with a gun, not a knife. But, these large influential pages like Moms for Liberty, who are weaponizing their followers and weaponizing the fear people have of something happening to their children and using that to attack a marginalized group, the LGBTQI community, and like they see nothing wrong with that, while the real predators are being overlooked, who are so heavily embedded in our society. We look at people who are in the churches, people who are in positions of power, whether it's law enforcement, teachers, whatever, youth leaders, and I don't just mean within churches, if any kind of sports or anything. And these people are taught to our children that they can trust and that they're good, and that doesn't happen with someone because they're gay or because they're trans. Why are we glossing over where the huge chunk is? Because at the end of the day, someone is not in any kind of power just because they might be gay.
Exactly.
Trans. They're weaponizing against the wrong people. And they're not making any changes. All they're doing is adding a deflection, a distraction for children to continue being abused.
Yeah, and it's exactly the reason why I always say that these people do not actually care about protecting children. I mean, you have, for instance, Matt Walsh, who is someone who calls trans people pedophiles and groomers. But
he is one himself.
Honestly,
let's be real about that. If you're doing that, if you're going out there and just basically claiming someone is a pedophile or someone is a groomer, it's probably because you don't want anyone checking your hard drives.
Exactly, especially because Matt Walsh particularly has defended pedophilia in the Catholic Church. He said it doesn't have a pedophile problem, it has a gay problem. Which, I mean, Jesus Christ, Matt Walsh, how can anyone say that?
Problem, it seems, though.
Exactly. He also defended Josh Duggar from the 19 Kids and Counting family who molested his younger siblings, raped them, and then is now in jail for child pornography. And he said that if he found out his son was molesting his daughter, he wouldn't call the police. I mean, this is someone who does not care about protecting children. And they are in that, regard, protecting actual pedophiles, which is why I like your content so much, because you really show they are trying to distract you from the actual people who are actually harming the children.
If they're not, it's not just the actual people. It's that most of these people probably are the actual people. That's there is that if they're out there crying about how the drag queens are coming for your kids, check their hard drives.